Okay, guys, so make sure you click the attendance question, you do the journal, and then you look at the introduction and Thomas à Becket's Reconstructed Shrine. But I want to show you this today because we were going to go over this together in class. So if you look at the general prologue worksheet, you need to click on this. It'll pop out another window. But you're going to need to keep this in your Google Drive. We're going to be using it for a while. And then if you'll go back in the module, you can see here's a link and you can click the pop-out window to get the translation from the Middle English to the general prologue with the modern English version. So that'll pop out as well. But I wanted to talk briefly about the general prologue worksheet. We're going to do the night together. But as you go through and read the general prologue, you need to find all of the pilgrims mentioned in the general prologue, and you need to know, number one, how does Chaucer characterize each one? Offer two details with line numbers to support this. So in your first box, you're going to say if it's primarily direct characterization or primarily indirect characterization. Sometimes he uses both, and that's fine. But then you're going to use two details from the text about that pilgrim that support what you put in this box, okay? And then at the last box, you're going to see Chaucer's attitude. Attitude needs to either be positive, negative, or neutral, okay? And be careful, because one of the things that we're going to look at as we read the Canterbury Tales is Chaucer's use of satire. So you have to think, he's writing in the Middle Ages. What's going on in the feudal system? Well, you have what powerful entities? Well, you have the king and the people who are underneath him. And then you also have the church. And if you have a power structure, and the church is a very powerful organization, as it was in the Middle Ages. And when we're talking about church, the church at that point was the Catholic Church. But along with that power came some corruption. So even though he may say something that sounds good about a character, you need to think about what their role, the character's role, should be in society or in church or in etc. And then if he's using satire, then you would say that his attitude is negative. But we're going to look at the night together. So if you'll click on the general prologue, we're going to see the first 18 lines. Please listen to those in the Middle English. And second hour, if you're here today, I'm going to have you try to read those together. But then you're going to look at the translation, okay? So we have, when April with its sweet-smelling showers had pierced the drought of March to the root, and then we have flowers are created, and then we have wind, Zephyrus eke with his suete, that's the west wind. So what time of the year is it very windy? And then we see in line 10 and 11, people start to want to go on trips. And then we see, I can't find the line right now. Yeah, line 9, and small fowls make melody. When do the birds sing and their tender new leaves are coming out? So all of these are telling us that our setting is the springtime, okay? So make sure you're familiar with that, okay? Now, why are we having the frame story of the Canterbury Tales, the general prologue? Okay, you should have gotten this through some of your introduction, but people are leaving from England, but in here it's England, but it's referencing London, and they're going down to Canterbury. So why are they going to Canterbury? Well, line 17 tells us, to seek the holy blissful martyr. Who is that martyr? Okay, so let me give you a little bit of history. You should have seen this on some of the other things. But in 1170, we had Henry II, who was the King of England, and so he was powerful. And then we had Thomas à Becket, or sometimes you'll see him referred to as Thomas Becket. He was the Archbishop of Canterbury, so he was kind of like the quote-unquote Pope of England. He was the head of the church in England, and he was so far away from Rome that he did have a lot of power. So we have two powerful men, and they don't get along. So what happens? Well, the king one day was heard to say that he wished somebody would get rid of this problem for him. And so 4 of his knights took him at his word. They traveled the 60 miles from London down to Canterbury, to the Canterbury Cathedral, where legend says Thomas Becket was in prayer at the altar. Now, whether he was in prayer at the altar, I'm not sure. Um, and so his 4 knights, Henry's 4 knights, killed Thomas Becket in the church. So he became a martyr, and supposedly, like supernatural things would happen at his death site. So people would come and they would pray to Thomas Becket when they were sick. Okay, so that's why they're going down to Canterbury, because pilgrims, over cultures and time, pilgrims take, religious journeys. So this is a journey that these people are taking. Now, that road going from London to Canterbury, it's about 60 miles away, but it was very dangerous in the Middle Ages. So people would gather at 3 inns to kind of make travel groups, if you will. Okay, so it was kind of like let's go on a tour, a vacation tour with somebody. So this group happens to meet in Southwark, which is on the other side of the Thames River from London. And so they meet at the Tabard Inn. Okay, and they're ready to, and so we have an unnamed narrator who's ready to go on this pilgrimage with them. And so they're staying at this hotel, and they're going to get the hostelry, the hotel, and they're going to get up the next morning and they're going to leave. Well, how many people are meeting together to go on this tour? We have 9 and 20 in a company. So that means we have 29, and then we have our unnamed narrator. So we're up to 30 people going on this tour. Okay, so they're going to ride together. They had the best accommodations. Their bedrooms and the stables were spacious. This was a nice place for them to meet and leave from. But then the narrator says, before we leave, before we head out on our pilgrimage, I'm going to tell you about these people, these 29 people who were traveling with me. And I'm going to tell you who they were and of what social rank. And then the clothing they're wearing, because clothing says a lot about a person. And then he's going to start with the night. Okay, so this is where we're going to pick up with our prologue worksheet. Okay, so we have a knight there was, and one that was a worthy man. So we've already had, he's called a worthy man, but let's double check and make sure Chaucer's not just being satiric here, okay? Who from the time he first began to write out, he loved chivalry, fidelity, and good reputation, generosity, and courtesy. He was very worthy in his lord's war, and for that he had ridden no man farther, as well in Christendom as in heathen lands, and was ever honored for his worthiness. He was at Alexandria when it was won. He had sat very many times in the place of honor, above knights of all nations in Prussia. He had campaigned in Lithuania and in Russia. No Christian man of his rank so often. Also he had been in Granada at the siege of Algeciras, and had ridden in Morocco. He was at Asha in Italia when they were won, and in the Mediterranean. He had been a many noble expedition. He had been at 15 mortal battles, and fought for our faith at, the original says Tremesen, and that's the old version I used to use, 3 times in formal duels, and each time slain his foe. The same worthy knight had also been at one time with the Lord of Balat against another heathen in Turkey, and evermore he had an outstanding reputation, and although he was brave, he was prudent, and of his deportment as meek as is a maid. He never yet said any rude word in all his life unto any sort of person. He was truly perfect, noble knight. But to tell you of his clothing, his horses were good, but he was not gaily dressed. He wore a tunic of coarse cloth, all stained with rust by his coat of mail, for he was recently come back from his expedition and went to do his pilgrimage. Okay, so let's go back to the chart and let's see what we're going to say. All right, so do we think Chaucer used primarily, or the details we're going to find, direct or indirect characterization? Okay, I'm going to say direct characterization, and we're going to pull out a couple of lines. And for the 2 details, make sure you have at least 2 words with a line number. So again, 2 words, line number for each number. So you're going to have at least 4 words and 2 line numbers in this box, okay? And then we're going to talk about Chaucer's attitude. So we feel like it was direct characterization. Let's go pull those lines that we're going to use. Okay, one of them, he's called a worthy knight in line 64. So I would put worthy knight, line 64. Okay, line 67, outstanding reputation. Okay, that's another good one. And then we can go back up here. He sits in the place of honor. That would tell us about him. He was honored for his worthiness. You could use line 50. So he loved all of these good things. So you could use line 46, fidelity and good reputation, generosity and courtesy. Any of those words would work. So, and we also have back up here in line 43 that he was a worthy man. Okay, so all of these are very positive, direct characterizations about our man, our knight. Okay, so let's go back to the worksheet. So do we feel like Chaucer's attitude is positive, negative, or neutral? Okay, so it's a very positive attitude. So you would type direct characterization, give 2 lines with at least 2 words for the 2 details here. So 4 words minimum. You can have more, but 4 words minimum, 2 line numbers, and then Chaucer's attitude here is going to be positive. Now, on a few of these, we're going to see that we might not necessarily agree. Like, I might feel like a character is negative that you feel is positive. And that's okay as long as your details and your characterization support what you're saying here. And we're going to talk about some of these later on in class. All right, guys, so I hope this makes a little more sense. Make sure that you understand this is a frame story. We're starting with the general prologue, and so we're going to learn who the characters are, and all of these characters were supposed to tell 2 tales on the way to Canterbury, and then 2 tales on the way back, and then they were going to have a little competition to see who wrote the best tale, and they would win dinner when they got back to the inn, when they finished their pilgrimage. But unfortunately, Geoffrey Chaucer died before he could finish all of the stories. So the knight was supposed to tell 2 tales on the way there, 2 tales on the way back, squire, yeoman, prioress, monk, etc. We don't have all of these stories, and we're not reading all of these stories. But this is the general prologue to give us the outline of the frame story, to introduce the characters to us, and then we will focus on at least 2 of the tales of the pilgrims, and we'll be talking about those. All right, so if you have any questions, the worksheet is not going to be completed today. All you have to do for today is to fill in what we talked about the night, and then keep this in your Google Drive, because next Monday you'll be picking up with this to continue on in the general prologue. Okay, remember tomorrow in class, or Thursday, whatever day you're here, we are going to have a visit with Miss Bird, the senior counselor, and then on Friday, you're going to have time to work on your choice book project. Excuse me. Don't forget your rough draft is due tomorrow night, but I'll have directions. Thursday night, but I will have directions for that. Okay? Bye, guys.